The July sun drifted pale and hazy over the low, rolling pastures of Stirlingshire, gilding every blade of summer grass as though time itself meant to pause and watch the coming storm. For miles around Falkirk, farms lay stripped of grain, wells lay bricked, and bridges lay toppled. Proof of a scorched earth policy as desperate as it was brilliant. William Wallace, guardian of Scotland for scarcely 10 months, had ordered the land denied to King Edward I's invading host, hoping English bellies would ache long before Scottish spirits bent. Yet the hammer of the Scots was not a man to be starved into resignation. Edward's army, 20,000 strong and swollen by contingents from Gascony, Wales, and Ireland, marched with wagon trains that seemed to stretch from Linlithgow to the Firth of Forth. Oxen hauled flour and salt pork, barrels sloshed with Bordeaux, and armories clanked with spare bowstrings and iron-shod stakes. Hungry they were. Deterred they were not. On the evening of 21st July 1298, the first English outriders sighted smoke from Wallace's bivouacs just south of Callendar Wood. The king smiled a thin, predatory smile. At last, the elusive rebel wished to stand. Fate, like a great wheel, was turning toward a reckoning written in pikes, arrows, and blood. To English chroniclers, Wallace was a reiver thug grown inconveniently charismatic, a man who had ridden the shock waves of Stirling Bridge into international notoriety. To most Scots, he had become something rarer, proof that a common-born knight, if possessed of colossal will, could humble the mightiest empire in Christendom. His name was whispered in candlelit chapels from Aberdeen to Galloway. Mothers lulled babes with rhymes of how he felled Sheriff Heselrig like an oak. Merchants toasted his daring in Bruges taverns. Yet adoration could not conjure resources. Scotland's feudal magnates, divided by rival claims to the throne of Balliol and Bruce, often balked at serving a leader who wielded neither noble blood nor royal writ. Wallace's infantry, though fierce, were peasant levies armed with cut-down plowshares and hand-forged pikes. His cavalry numbered scarcely 600 light horse, 500 fewer than at Stirling, and a mere sliver beside Edward's mailed horde. Even so, Wallace had one weapon England still underestimated, the Schiltron, a hedgehog of 12-foot spears angled outward in overlapping rings, capable of halting a cavalry avalanche if its men stood firm. At Falkirk, he meant to test that living fortress on ground he had chosen with grim consideration. The chosen ground lay between two pools of marshy water, Prestopan's Moss to the west, and the broader Gramston Loch to the east, linked by a sluggish burn that curved like a silver scythe across the plain. Callendar Wood's thick pine screen shielded Wallace's rear. In front of the trees, he arranged 4 great circles of spearmen, each perhaps 2,000 strong, their outer ranks kneeling with pike butts dug deep, inner ranks bracing over their shoulders to create a forest of iron points. Gaps between Schiltrons he filled with archers from Selkirk and Ettrick, lithe men whose short self-bows lacked the range of Welsh longbows, but shot fast and low. Sir John Stewart of Bannockburn commanded a slender column of Gallaglass and Islesmen to protect the left flank. Sir John Comyn and Sir Robert the Bruce, present though uneasy under Wallace's banner, held a token cavalry on the right. Wallace himself took no horse. Clad in sleeveless mail and the saltire surcoat of St. Andrew, he strode the inner ring of his foremost Schiltron, speaking to faces creased by fear and fervor alike. "Plant your feet as oaks," he urged, voice carrying above the rustling pikes. "Think on your kin behind these woods. Think on Stirling, when rivers ran red with English pride. Hold. Around him, men kissed crucifixes, knotted kerchiefs around brows, whispered the old Gaelic war prayer. Gub and Latha Lane, let the day be ours. At dawn on 22nd July, the English host spilled from Linlithgow toward Falkirk, under banners snapping in a brisk westerly wind. Trumpets bleated, kettle drums boomed, and the dust of 20,000 souls blurred the morning sky. Edward rode at the fore, mail glimmering silver, surcoat red like spilled wine. Though lamed by a recent fall from his war horse, the king sat ramrod straight, the legendary temper of his crusader years still burning behind hawk-bright eyes. He dispatched the Earl of Lincoln with advance cavalry to test Scottish nerve, while ordering his Welsh archers, perhaps 6,000 of them, to uncase their 6-foot yew-bows. Clusters of Gascon crossbowmen filed in behind, winding cranks with practiced ease. When the English crest cleared a low rise, they saw Wallace's 4 pike rings shimmering beyond the burn. No walls, no ramparts, just men bristling like sea urchins upon open pasture. Old campaigners such as Sir Aymer de Valence twitched uneasily. They remembered Stirling's bridge choke and feared another trap. But Edward's confidence was absolute. He would shatter the Schiltrons with arrows, peel them apart with cavalry, and ride down whatever fragments remained. Simple, surgical, final. The first clash opened with thunderous spectacle. Lincoln's mailed men at arms spurred forward in 2 wings, pennonsels fluttering. They expected the Scottish cavalry to meet them in gallant melee, but Wallace had withheld the signal. His horsemen wheeled instead behind Callendar Wood. Deprived of targets, English knights found themselves cantering beneath a sudden hail of arrows from Stewart's forest-edged archers. 3 horses screamed down, 1 knight flipped, limbs flailing. Lincoln reined in, cursing, as Stewart's men melted back through willow scrub. It was a paltry sting, yet it drew first blood and forced Edward to commit his archers sooner than planned. With curt gestures, the king ordered the Welsh to the fore. In disciplined rows, they planted long iron-tipped stakes, kissed their bowstrings for luck, and drew to the ear. A sound like a vast canvas ripping tore the air as thousands of goose-feathered shafts rose, glittered against the pale sun, and slanted toward the Scottish line. Those first volleys struck with volcanic ferocity. Arrows hissed between pike shafts, punching into unarmored thighs, clanging off kettle helmets, ripping through linen jack and flesh alike. Men shrieked, flailed, and toppled. The Schiltrons quivered, but did not open. Inner ranks shuffled to plug dead men's gaps, hauling pikes from limp fingers. Wallace barked orders to drop shields overhead. Archers from Selkirk answered by loosing return flights that fell 30 yards short of the Welsh ranks. The disparity in range was cruelly clear. English arrows thumped in wave after wave, and soon the archers shifted aim, targeting the Irish axemen guarding the gaps. Stewart's Islesmen staggered, their wicker targets shredded. Stewart himself, hero of many border forays, went down with an arrow lodged in his neck. His fall rippled panic along the Scottish left. In moments, the protective screen of light troops dissolved, leaving wide avenues of bare turf between the pike corrals. Edward saw opportunity and nodded to the Earl of Norfolk. Unleash the cavalry. Across Across the trampled burn thundered 3,000 horse, breastplates gleaming, lances couched. They formed into two converging wedges aimed at the exposed intervals. The ground trembled. The clang of metal drowned lamb bleats in distant fields. Wallace raised a two-handed sword and roared, "Steady, pikes high, faces low." The Schiltrons shifted like clockwork gears, outer ranks kneeling, second ranks stabbing over shoulders. A score of pikes bit into the first charger. Its scream curdled blood, but momentum hurtled beasts straight onto iron spikes. Knights toppled in chaos. Those who dismounted tried to hack pike shafts with axes, only to find new spearheads lunging from within. For a moment, the English charge crumpled into a heap of rearing destriers and entangled lances. Scottish cheers rose ragged and wild, but another arrow storm swept over them, and now Gascon crossbow bolts peppered faces pressed tight within the pike circles. Blinded men loosed grips. Gaps widened. Cavalry, regrouping, found chinks. One wedge slashed clean through the archers between the second and third Schiltron, spinning to hammer the rear ranks of pikes. Screams spiraled skyward. Blood glazed the pasture like dew. On the Scottish right, Sir Robert the Bruce watched carnage with anguished eyes. His tiny cavalry, hemmed by superior numbers, faced annihilation if they charged, and suspicion if they held. In later generations, Bruce would redeem Scotland at Bannockburn, but Falkirk was Wallace's day, and his command was absolute. So the Bruce wheeled southward, shielding remnants of Stewart's Islesmen retreating into the wood. Chroniclers of England would later hiss that Bruce betrayed Wallace, yet surviving Gaelic accounts speak differently. He saved a fragment of Scotland's knightly class from needless butchery, preserving a seed for future wars. Whatever truth, the absence of those horsemen left Wallace's Schiltrons increasingly alone amid a sea of enemies. Hour bled into hour under the killing sun. Arrows dwindled but did not cease. Pike walls shrank but did not fold. Blood clumped in beards, matted kilts, glued mail to raw skin. Still Wallace strode the ring, voice hoarse yet unbroken, lifting fallen pikes into fresh hands. A stray shaft grazed his brow. Crimson trickled down the St. Andrew cross across his chest. "Ye think a scratch will still my tongue," he growled, and men laughed raggedly as they adjusted their feet upon slippery ground. Yet morale could not mend wounds or reanimate the dead. When archers ran out of arrows entirely, English commanders unleashed the final hammer blow. Dismounted men at arms with poleaxes advanced in dense files, shields overlapping. They weathered a flurry of thrown stones and darts, reached the outer pike ring, and used hooked bills to wrench spearheads sideways. Knights behind plunged swords into the opened gaps. One Schiltron sagged like a breached wine barrel, and English infantry poured inside, hacking in circular fury. The circle shattered. Survivors fled toward Callendar Wood, where Edward's second cavalry wave raced to finish them. Seeing the third circle yield, Wallace faced a choice immortalized in bardic legend. He could die where he stood, martyr to a day already lost. Or he could extricate the living core of Scotland's resistance for wars yet to come. He chose life, bitter and necessary. With a thunderous whistle, he signaled retreat. Horns brayed through smoke. The rear Schiltron opened a narrow corridor. Wallace and his captains herded as many wounded as possible down that corridor and into the sheltering forest. English knights tried pursuit, but floundered amid felled trunks and boggy ground, their great horses sinking fetlock deep. Arrowless Welshmen waded in after, blades drawn, only to find themselves ambushed by small knots of Scots hiding behind root boles. Skirmishes flickered through the cedar gloom until dusk bled purple across the horizon. Then silence crept back, broken only by the croak of ravens and the low moans of the dying. On the open plain lay perhaps 7,000 Scots, sprawled like broken thistles, their pikes snapped, their banners muddied. English losses numbered fewer than 3,000, grim but bearable for a monarch whose coffers and manpower dwarfed those of a fractured kingdom to the north. Nightfall brought Edward no euphoria, only exhaustion and a gnawing ache in his damaged hip. By torchlight, he surveyed the field, strewn shields painted azure with the saltire, tartan plaids soaked black, long ranks of arrow-spiked corpses pointing accusing fingers at a sky stewing with storm clouds. He knew a tactical triumph when he saw one. Yet even in victory, he sensed that he had not broken Scottish defiance, only bloodied its most incandescent champion. Wallace, wounded yet alive, melted into the Trossachs with a band of loyalists. Over the next 2 years, he would fight a dozen guerrilla actions, evade capture through moors and mountain passes, and lend his name to letters pleading for the aid of France and the papacy. Betrayal, capture, and the hideous theater of his execution in London still lay distant on the wheel of fate. But Falkirk had carved its price across his soul. He relinquished the guardianship, passing Scotland's rudder to Robert the Bruce and John Comyn, men whose political pedigree eclipsed his own. For Scotland, the cost of Falkirk was felt in bereft households from Ayrshire crofts to the fishing villages of Fife. Yet, memory is gifted with strange alchemy. What English scribes recorded as the obliteration of a rebel rabble, Scottish minstrels reframed as a testament to ordinary pike men who held long enough to prove that courage could thresh the flower of European cavalry. The Schiltron, though battered, had absorbed charges once thought unstoppable, a precedent that Bannockburn would later elevate to legend. Edward's arrows and ruthless combined arms had won the ground, but he could not occupy every glen his horsemen trampled. In the years following Falkirk, castles changed hands, allegiances shifted like reeds in a gale, and the medieval pike wall evolved. Longer spears, tighter drill, mutual support by archers and light cavalry. These ideas germinated amid the blood of Falkirk and would flower when Bruce knelt in prayer before deploying his own circles of pikes on the Carsey of Bannockburn in 1314. And so, when travelers today wander the quiet meadows south of Falkirk, they find only the drone of bees and the sleepy call of wood pigeons. Unaware, they tread upon ground that once rang with iron-shod hooves and the cries of men wagering nations upon the length of a spear. But if they listen, truly listen, they might hear the echo of Wallace's command, the whistle of Welsh arrows slicing summer air, and the rumble of an English king's cavalry rolling like thunder across eternity. For on 22nd July 1298, two visions of power collided in a tableau of mud and valor, one driven by imperial ambition, the other by fierce inheritance of land and liberty. The aftermath proved that walls of flesh and wood could delay, but not yet defeat a war machine forged in continental discipline. Yet the dream Wallace ignited would smolder in Scottish hearts until, years later, it blazed anew on another field. Falkirk wrote a chapter of loss, but within its ashes lay the ink for legends still to be sung beside peat fires when night draws long over the highlands. There, in story, in sorrow, in unyielding pride, the Guardian's shadow stands eternal, pike in hand, bidding every generation ask what freedom costs and what courage owes in return.